So today we're going to be talking about water and water systems. So we'll go over all the aspects of how permaculturalists may look at utilizing water in the landscapes, and this will be from anywhere from saving water to cleaning water, conserving water. So why is it important that we would want to know about water? Well, water is very important for our life. Without water, we pretty much can't support life. And as a permaculturalist, you may have seen in the earthworks that if we can't harvest water, we can't perform agriculture. So this is going to be a reasoning that we want to look at it. But once we're able to harvest the water, I have water in my landscape, I can store it in my soils, I can catch it in the earthen pots, I can do different things with it. But then I want to see the uses that I can take with water. So we need to drink water, we need to wash our hands, we need to cook, we need to plant things, and there's a long list of things that we can do with water. But without water, the biggest issue is that it'd be very difficult to value property. Would anyone like to buy some property without water? Like Arizona, is that expensive? No, it's really cheap. So if with water, so when I bought this property, we have no water catchment. The property was valued cheaply, 25,000 baht a rye, super, super cheap. But I was able to come in and build dams, earthen catchments, and swales, and now with the water harvesting capacity, we can increase the value of the property, and that allows us to do the agricultural endeavors that we do. So we also want to look at any other important uses we may have of water. And without water, basically all of our plants will die. So here in Thailand, for instance, we have an 8-month dry period. So this is called the wet, dry tropics. So 4 months, lots of rain. Rains every day. Very nice, plants grow really well. But for almost 8 months, no rain. And at that point, if we don't conserve our water, we won't be able to grow vegetables. Our garden would die within about 2 weeks of not turning on the water. So that's not very good. So if we have it, we can grow, we have life. If not, don't. So we don't really want to go thirsty. This is a major aspect. We can look at water. What's it made of? Well, water is basically a crystalline structure. We can see it here forming into ice crystals, and we can look at those purposes. In a permaculture standpoint, though, we don't really get into the science of water. It's not like being in earth science. We need to understand water in that way. We want to understand what we can do with it, how we can harness it, and how we can put it into systems. So that's more so what we're going to look at. And we need to understand the global water cycle. How is the water cycle working? Okay, so in a global way, on a very macro view. Basically, most of our water, 85%, is from evaporation of the ocean. So the ocean has sun, it evaporates, it creates storm events, that comes over the land, it falls into rainfall patterns, okay? And at this point, those patterns will cycle in cycles throughout, comes back in stream flow, some of it is trapped in aquifers, and we're able to then utilize a portion of that water. So in this instance, it creates a global water belt or a conveyor belt, and this is also what's stabilizing the temperature. So this conveyor system is stabilizing Earth's temperatures at what we find as Earth's norm. So we're very lucky, we're born into, and the temperature of the Earth doesn't move very much within our lifetime. This is kind of the concept where people talk about climate change, global warming. They expect that I really don't want it to change in my lifetime. I like where I was born, I like the temperature, and I don't want it to change, right? So what's driving this change? So we want to look at that also. We can look at how it's stored. So this is where you saw with your earthworks. We can elicit storage systems through swales. We can basically slow down water flow. So if we think about a swale, it's kind of like a speed bump, right? If I slow down the water, it allows time to spread out on contour. It's going to be flat. That allows me time to sink it in. So we want to look at these types of systems. But once we're able to do that, how do we clean it and how do we utilize it from more like a personal hygiene standpoint? So the world, 70% of our Earth is water, okay, as we know it, if you're not looking at crust and mantles. So of that utilization, you can even say that we probably arrived historically in our evolution from things that were in the water, derived, came up into the sea to create what we know as mammals. And we can get some facts. So the world's 70%, you're made up of 75% water. So if we dehydrate you, what's left? The weight, right? 25%. Of that, you know what 10% is not human DNA? What do we have inside of us that's not human? In your gut. How can you eat food? You know you can't eat food? You can eat food, but you can't digest food. The bacteria does that. So we have a symbiosis relationship with bacterial colonies that are in our body, and if they take that and weigh, it's 10% of our body weight. Our brain constitutes 80% water, and that's why if you get dehydrated, let's say you drank too many Changs last night, right? Anybody do that? No? Maybe you get dehydrated. Your blood 83, muscle 70. A tomato, 95% water. Did you realize when you bought a tomato that you were just paying for water? Yeah, it's lots of fruits and vegetables. That's why they make a lot of money, just basically selling us water. And chicken, 75%, so just like us. So if we look at all this water in the world and we try to break it down, where is water located? How can I get usage? Well, 97.5% of all the water in the world is basically salt water in our oceans and seas. That leaves us with 2.5%, which is fresh water, and that's found in glaciers, lakes, rivers, and underground aquifers. 80% of that 2.5%, 80% of the 2.5% is locked up in ice caps and glaciers, so we can't access it readily. So that only leaves us the remaining 20%, which is basically comes down to 1% of the world's water we can actually access as humans. 0.0025% of the Earth's water. But that's still a lot. So these charts sometimes are used to scare you, to say, hey, there's not enough water. But how much water do you think 0.0025% is? Lots. So the problem is not that we don't have water. We have lots of fresh water. The issue is we have people living in places where there's not enough fresh water. So these people have a lot of fresh water, excess. These people have a deficiency of fresh water. So we want to try to look at that, how if we do or don't have enough water, what can we do with it? It's also a fact that as global warming, climate change starts to happen, that our ice melt is melting, so that our sea levels will rise. So that's something else to take into consideration about where you live, what's going to happen in general there. So if you're on a plan, you're doing your design, have you thought about any climatic factors that could affect your design? So if there's going to be climate change, which I like to say is like climate weirding, which happening, the peaks, the extremes are happening. It's getting colder and it's getting hotter. It's getting more rainfall for flooding. It's also getting more droughts. So you need to design for the extremes. So your design should capture that in the future it may actually get hotter or may actually get colder, or you may have more flooding or you may have more droughts. So that's something to design for. And we can see this when we look at things. So this is a Pletzer Glacier. This picture was taken in 1875. Pretty nice glacier. That's in 2004. So the entire glacier had melted. It's no longer forms as a glacier. This is the Portage Glacier, a 1914 photo. Nice, beautiful. And this is in Alaska. So you think Alaska should not have ice? It's pretty far north, right? Gone. 2004, gone. So we need to understand that our fresh water is coming out of the ice caps, which is increasing our sea level, and some mitigations. So one of the problems we have is how much people use it. So people already use over half of the world's accessible fresh water. And as we have an expanding population, and we probably could double our population, some people can estimate in the next 20 years, that's going to use up nearly 3/4 of the Earth's accessible fresh water by 2025. So that's going to make access to water basically a commodity. Has anyone been to Australia and bought water in a gas station before? It's the same price as petrol. Water costs the same amount as fuel. So it's a commodity, and in this instance we're paying a lot for it. So it's a really weird phenomenon. You go in a gas station and have to pay the same for water. And the global consumption of water is doubling every 20 years. So if we look historically, people are accessing and wanting to use more water. And more than twice the rate of the human population. So people, what that means is our population is growing, but our consumption per capita is growing more than the population rate. Thus, we'll get to 2025 and use almost 3/4 of our accessible fresh water. And one of the bigger problems is Western societies, one of them being the largest consumer, the US, where I'm from. The US alone jumped from 330 million gallons per day in 1980 to 408 million gallons per day in 1990. And that's with 10 years of technological efficiencies, we still used more water. So this is a real problem. The amount of water that's used per person per day. So some people using lots of water. And in other places, if we were to go to like Africa, we go to India, things like this, we see people that barely have access to any water. Some people in Africa only get like on average 10 liters of water a day. And that's really only almost enough to drink and cook. There's no excess. So it's really tough. So in a Western water consumption, the United States consumes water at twice the rate of any other industrialized nation. So the number 2 on the chart only uses half as much water per capita. And a child that's born in a developed world consumes 30 to 50 times. So most of you being from developed nations would use 30 or 50 times more water than a person, say, a child that might be in Africa or India in a very poor area. And Americans flush literally 6.8 billion gallons of water down the toilets, okay, in a day. So we also want to look at why do we use drinking water, or what we consider fresh water, to dispose of our waste? Why would we want to do that? And if we do flush it down, you flush the toilets here at Raktamachat? Hopefully. What is this saying? If it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. Could save water, right? No? Nobody practiced that one? I tried to teach my wife that. She didn't really like it. But it saves water. But at this point, if we flush the water down the toilet and it goes out into a drain, the sewer plant, into the ocean, that's a waste of nutrients. Remember the nutrients that we have? So when we eat, lots of our nutrients pass through. We keep some, but most of them are out in our defecate. So if we can capture that water into a reed bed system, which we can look at later, and we have reed beds here that we capture your nutrients. So we feed you nutrients and we capture that nutrient. If we can capture the nutrient, whether it's a compost or a reed bed system, we're able to grow plants, and then we can keep that nutrient cycle, right? So the issue with the toilet is when they don't keep the nutrient cycle, and they take the water, basically put it into drains and put it into the ocean. So 1.2 billion people in the world, growing every day, don't have access to what's considered by the World Health Organization an access of clean drinking water.